All right, good afternoon, everybody. Perfect. Good afternoon. My name is Justin Schmitz. I represent the City of Lone Tree and serve as the chair of the DRCOG Transportation Advisory Committee. I call to order the April 20th, 2026 DRCOG TAC meeting at 1:30 p.m. In this in-person live stream meeting format, members of the public attending by Zoom have the ability to mute or unmute themselves and share their webcam. For those attending online, please make sure that your typed name reflects your first and last name and who you represent. I ask that those attending to speak use the raise hand button to ask your question or comment on an agenda item. If you have any technical questions, please put those to the staff in the chat box. As a reminder to members and alternates here in person, please press the unmute button on the bottom of your mic stand, make sure the light on your microphone is on, and when you're prepared to speak, and speak directly into the microphone so that your voice will amplify. Please announce your name and representation whenever asking a question or making a comment for our record. During the business meeting and agenda, TAC members and alternates can speak or ask questions. Members of the public may only speak during our public comment period. DRCOG is sending around a sign-up sheet, so please make sure you sign in. At this time, we're going to have TAC members and alternates introduce themselves in person, and we'll start on the left with Rocky today.
Rocky McSilka, City of Wheat Ridge, Jefferson County. Good afternoon, Jordan Rudel, CDOT Region 1.
Alex Hadright, Boulder County. Miguel Aguilar, Southwest Weld County, Town of Erie. Chris Quinn with RTD.
David Krutzinger, City and County of Denver.
Jim Kotzer, Arapahoe County.
Zeke Lynch, Douglas County.
Jonathan Webster, City and County of Denver.
Josh Schwank, DRCOG staff.
Marker Braddock, City of Aurora, Arapahoe County.
Colleen Kirby-Roberts, Environmental Special Interest Seat.
Brody Ayers, Aviation Special Interest Seat.
Carson Priest, TDM Special Interest Seat.
Brent Soderlund, Arapahoe County, City of Littleton.
Mike Whitaker, Jefferson County, Lakewood.
Christina Lane, Jefferson County. Ellie Van Bruggen, City of Arvada.
Amy Boyle, Gilpin County.
Kent Mormon, Adams County, City of Thornton.
Michelle Malinakis, City of Lafayette, Boulder County.
Dean Sanson, City of Boulder.
Michelle Riccio, Adams County.
Jeff Boyd, Housing Special Interest.
Jenna Hahn, Adams County, City of Commerce City.
Angie Rivera, Malpieti, Equity Special Seat.
Jacob Rieger, DRCOG staff.
Justin Schmidt, City of Lone Tree, Douglas County.
Alvin Vidal Sanchez, DRCOG staff.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. We're now going to pass it off to Alvin for some quick announcements.
One quick announcement today, Chair. A goodbye to a member of the TAC, Michelle Riccio, will be leaving Adams County on May 4th, so I did want to offer her the opportunity to talk about her next steps.
Hi, everyone. I really appreciated the level of expertise in this room and mentorship, and we all get to engage on each other's projects. It's been a really good group to be part of for the past few years, so thank you for that. I'll still be in the area, and I'll be just moving over to consulting and working for a small consulting firm called Leadline, so you can find me there. But yeah, thank you for everything. I appreciate it, and to DRCOG staff.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle, for your contributions to the TAC for the past few years. And yeah, we'll catch up on the consulting side. So sounds good. All right. Well, any other announcements? Okay. Well, with that, we will now open the meeting for our public comment. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes each. If you've joined by Zoom, please raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button, and we'll call on you to begin speaking. If you joined by phone, please raise your virtual hand by pressing *9. And we will call on you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. Staff will then unmute you, and then you will need to unmute yourself by pressing *6 on your phone. You have 3 minutes to speak, after which we will ask you to wrap up and your line will be muted. As a reminder, after the public comment period, only TAC members and alternates will participate in the discussion regarding each item. So with that, I think we'll start online. Do we have any public comment online?
Mr. Chair, I do see a hand raised by Chandler Sanchez. Chandler, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak now.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Hello, and thank you all for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Chandler Sanchez, and I'm with the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and I'm here to give my feedback on the 2029 to 2032 TIP regional share discussion that you guys have been having over the past couple of months, really. So first off, I just want to say that we really support aligning DRCOG's regional share of dollars with projects that improve traveler safety and advance our regional Vision Zero goals. We believe that a core element of Vision Zero is creating complete streets that give people walking, rolling, biking, and riding transit the same safe, comfortable access as those driving. DRCOG has repeatedly affirmed this with the Taking Action on Regional Vision Zero report, which was updated in 2024, identifying safe and comfortable conditions for transit riders as well as pedestrians to be a key tenet of roadway safety. And if DRCOG does choose to align regional share funding with the goal of improving safety, these dollars should primarily go towards projects where safety is a core priority and not just an add-on. Multimodal improvements are safety improvements, and our current safety records show that we are falling short. Since 2019, the Denver metro region has seen a 20% spike in lethal or severe injury crashes as VMT has returned to pre-pandemic levels. Concerningly, pedestrians make up a disproportionate amount of these deaths, accounting for 19% of Colorado traffic deaths, despite only making up 8% of trips. It's really unsurprising then that nearly 60% of DRCOG residents are quote unquote interested but concerned about biking, and that ends up limiting bike use in areas where there is poor bike infrastructure or weak connectivity. Across DRCOG, almost 90% of the trips are completed by car, yet 43% of these trips are less than 3 miles, and 19% of these are less than just 1 mile. These statistics really highlight the unlocked potential for safer multimodal travel that exists within our region. Improving it also acts as a way to make our roads safer. A meta-analysis from the Victoria Transportation Policy Institute found that transit accidents are less frequent, less damaging, and far less lethal than personal vehicle accidents for both occupants and non-occupants, sorry. The American Public Transportation Association tried to quantify some of these safety gains from transit in a 29-year study of 100 US cities, which include Denver, and they found that 10% increase in transit passenger miles is associated with a 1.5% reduction in total traffic deaths. So again, projects that facilitate the safer movement of people, not the fastest movement of people through said corridors, should be the primary beneficiaries for these funds if we hope to make a meaningful progress at making our streets safer and reaching our really noble Vision Zero goals. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much for making the time to make comment today. Do we have any additional public comments online?
Mr. Chair, I do not see any additional hands raised.
Okay. Do we have any public comment in person? Okay. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close our public comment period for today. And we will move on to our meeting summary from our last meeting. At this time, we will move on the March 23rd, 2026 TAC meeting summary, which was attachment A in your packet. Is there any discussion, corrections, or questions about our TAC meeting summary from last meeting? Okay, seeing that, those will stand as approved. We will move on to our action items for today. We just have one action item, and that was item number 4, the 2026 to 2029 Transportation Improvement Program amendments. This was attachment B in your packet. And Josh Schwenk, Senior Planner with the Programming and Project Delivery Team, will be presenting this item.
All right, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So we do have a full list of proposed amendments to the Transportation Improvement Program. So first, CDOT Region 4 is proposing to add 2 new pool projects to their surface treatment pool, accounting for $11 million in state surface treatment funding. Next, Region 4 is proposing to add 1 new project to the RPP pool, as well as $9 million in state RPP funding to that pool. Region 4 is also proposing some changes to the Colorado 119 project. This includes rolling over $15 million in prior year raise funds into the current TIP, as well as the addition of $7,711,000 in state legislative funding, as well as $850,000 in state surface treatment funding. Next up, Region 4 has also proposed some changes to the US 287 safety median project. This includes some changes to the funding years, so shifting some funding from prior years into the current years, as well as the addition of $2,936,000 in federal infra funding, $5,483,000 in state FASTER funding, $923,000 in state safety funding, and $2,860,000 in state legislative funding. And then CDOT Region 1 has proposed the addition of $8.7 million in state legislative funding for their ramp metering project. Then we have some funding transfers where funding is being moved from several pools to consolidate it all into the I-270 project. So this would include the moving of $4.6 million in state safety funding from Region 1's hazard elimination pool, $1 million in federal bridge funding from the Region 1 Bridge on System pool, $4 million in state FASTER funding from the Region 1 FASTER pool, $1 million in RPP funding from the Region 1 RPP pool, and $1 million in ADA funding from the Region 1 ADA pool, and applying all of that to the I-270 project. So happy to answer any questions members may have. Otherwise, I do have a proposed motion available for you.
Thank you, Josh, for that presentation, and I'm glad we don't have a quiz on all those numbers, because holy cow. Any questions or comments? I did have one, Josh. I guess I was just curious, all the numbers, those project numbers, go back to like 2007. What do those refer to? I know it's probably some CDOT number. I'm just curious, do those go back that far, or is that just how they're labeled?
So the TIP ID numbers are actually based on the year that it was first added to the TIP. So in many cases, those pools have been around for many years, in some cases, many decades. So there are some in our TIP that go back all the way into the 1990s. So yes, especially for those CDOT pools, those are long-standing pools that date back many years.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. A motion for, all right, I could trust you yet.
I move to recommend to the Regional Transportation Committee the attached project amendments to the 26-20.
Second.
Thank you, Kent. And a second from Angie. Okay. Thank you very much. So we now have a motion on the table. We will now entertain the motion and go ahead and vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying no. Do you have any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. And thanks again, Josh, for that presentation.
Thank you.
So again, that was our only action item for today. We will now move into our informational briefings. And the first informational briefing of our day was item number 5, the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation I-70 Mountain Corridor Impact Study. This is attachment C in your packet. Jacob Reiger, Director of the Transportation Planning and Operations Division, will kick this item off and I believe pass it off.
Thank you, Chair Schmitz. Yes, thankfully I don't have to give this presentation. There's a lot of great facts and figures, but I did want to give an introduction to what this is. Back in 2007, the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation did a study of I-70 through the Mountain Corridor, really looking at the impacts of congestion on the I-70 corridor from several different perspectives, whether that's residents, businesses, quality of life, looking at it from several different dimensions. And so they wanted to update that study, and they've actually kept a lot of the methodology and a lot of the parameters the same, so they could actually compare between the two study efforts from 2007 now to 2026. So if I say any more, I will steal Sean's thunder. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to introduce Sean Brogg from the Metro Denver EDC to walk us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. You actually saved me getting into the key findings before I discussed a little bit about the project, so I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Bragg. I'm the Senior Economist and Director of Economic Competitiveness at the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, which is a division of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. I was the primary analyst on several sections of this report and was involved in the revisions that led to our final draft. With the departure of Hannah Scoville, I'll be now taking over this project, giving the external presentations and getting the final draft out to everyone. Just so everybody knows, the draft is out to stakeholders. We're anticipating feedback within the next couple days. We've also gotten some feedback from some earlier presentations that we'll be working in, and I'll go over a little bit of that further along in the presentation. Oop. Hold, please. Sorry. Very good presentation. Starts off with some technical difficulties. I'll just experiment here really quickly. And there we go. Okay, so really quickly on why a report like this matters. I-70 really serves as the primary connection between Metro Denver, the mountain resort region, and the Western Slope. And the performance of this corridor influences everything from workforce availability, tourism, freight movement, to public safety and overall economic efficiency. For the 226,000 residents of the Western Slope, reliable access to the Front Range markets is really essential for business operations, workforce mobility, and economic stability. For the 132,000 residents of the Mountain Resort region, congestion really influences tourism demand, employee access, housing affordability, and seasonal economic activity. And for the 3.3 million residents of Metro Denver, congestion affects both leisure travel and goods movement, and also overall regional economic efficiency. In this report, we're not really getting at solutions for congestion-related challenges. We're merely trying to say that, or to show that as Colorado grows, reliable year-round performance of the corridor is really critical to both regional economic efficiency, but also statewide competitiveness. Our key findings from this 2026 report are that $47 million in annual tourism revenue is at risk from congestion along the I-70 corridor. About $319 million is lost in terms of resident time value every year due to I-70 delays. Crucially, about $1.9 billion is lost every year from productivity decline due to congestion along I-70, and governments take in about $2.3 million less in revenue every year as a result of congestion along I-70. In total, this leads to our estimate of $2.25 billion a year in annual congestion costs. This is up from $339 million in the 2005 and really crucially here, this is up 53% in real terms. So what's going on here is not just inflation. There's a lot of other moving parts that are changing over time. Additional findings that we put in this report that are not part of our headline impact number estimate about $2.3 million an hour to be at risk. This is tourism spending in the mountain resort region due to significant closures. Additionally, local mountain businesses spend about $2 million additionally every year on added costs due to congestion-related delays. This number rises to $14 million across the entire corridor. Further, finally, we estimate that the upper bound cost capital improvement has risen to $30 billion in the 2011 PEIS study, and maintenance exceeds $4 million across the corridor. In addition to some of these more quantitative aspects, we also identified some emerging themes that we through in our first section. These are primarily extreme weather events. Talking about the increased of wildfire floods that have the ability to close or also create delays and increase risks. There are significant housing dynamics going on up in the second ownership rentals, pushing the resort workforce from where which is increased commute time and adding to also look at this report at traffic diversions. So with more frequent closures along we are putting on roadways that is not designed to handle that level of volume. This leads to not only longer times, but also increased risk. So can put a significant strain on local government have to with on the stretch of the corridor. It's really cool. This technology report released in 2007 that was done by Patty Stein, its research partners that evaluated the cost of along I-70. What we've done in this report is tried to make the same analytical report so that we can compare the results from the 2000 study to today's. Most we're doing here is quantifying the cost of inaction. So we're assuming that no significant improvements, if for significant effect on condition change analysis. Added some emerging changes. This includes some impact, also increased housing rates in the short-term rentals, and an additional on the increase in severity, climate, and weather. Throughout, we're looking at both quantitative and qualitative impacts. So, some significant improvements per capital on I-70 are did primarily the environmental protection, capacity. However, despite this, travel demand has grown faster than available capacity, and this is to persist and worsen congestion along the corridor. From a legislative perspective, the recent policy also aims increase safety and operational a pretty significant increase in dedicated transportation funds from Senate Bill 2660. However, I note Colorado is still the middle of the pack when it comes to state highway funds, and we're actually bottom pack when it comes to state highway funds for closest states. So these improved base conditions along. We use three state Idaho, the Idaho Tunnel, and Glen Springs. Idaho Springs handles the traffic. The largest increase from 2015 to 2025 actually occurred in the Springs region, and the largest 20 also in the Glenwood, and all regions put about just a 50% increase. So traffic in Colorado corridor are seasonal. Most actually transit in the summer. Just so you, I have my math right. Months half are actually 4 months, and the winter 6 months. So on a day month, more vehicles actually in the summer. Since the shoulder season has actually seen this increase, which would be some issues. Substantial 18.5% increase and a 12%. I should say that overall volumes are the summer, the congestion occurs due to weather, the ski travel concentration narrows. So, actually, the study, the regional vehicle travel are going to increase about 4% by 20. If we look at this regions, it's actually hiding down behind. I apologize. Glenwood is projected to see highest growth traffic, 50 up 35.5%. And then we actually think Idaho Springs but over that 25 period, are to grow in terms of baseline traffic emissions by over 25%. To the section go headline, tourism is a major of economic activity across is the corridor to one of the nation's outpatient numbers behind 13.8 million ski 4 to 25. Snow generates about 18.1 billion in contribution to Colorado. In the summer season, still a lot of traffic is a little bit high value when it comes. However, it is a decent amount of visitors there. Several sectors that benefit from this. Annual motorized recreation expenditures exceed 2.4 billion. Rafting in Colorado also has an economic of 2 billion. So across the state of Colorado, about 5.4 million visitors, 20.5 tourist-related expenditures. 2024 of this, 4.7 billion was spent in the mountain region and 780 million on the western slope. The 4.7 billion visitor spending is where we get our number of what risk due to congestion. The way I like to think about this number is not necessarily a nominal decline, but as a what could have occurred if congestion was a little bit reduced along I-70, people decided to take more trips. The effects of congestion along I-70 are actually kind of ambiguous when it comes to visitor travel in the sense that some visitors will forego a trip to do recreational activities closer to home. Others will choose to stay in the mountain resort region and spend additional money on lodging. So it's sort of unclear how this is going to affect tourism spending. The other thing I'd like to note is there are some travel alternatives to I-70. However, 83% of trips are undertaken with a personal vehicle as of 2024. To the resident impacts, there's a lot of information that goes into this report. We're thinking about people who are stuck in traffic that have to drive their vehicles, or they have to pay for vehicle repair. They also lose time that they could be earning wages or resting. Some of these factors have changed quite significantly. The cost to repair vehicles has increased quite significantly since 2005. Also, the value of people's time has increased a lot, with average real wages rising significantly, especially in the Metro Denver region, $43.22 an hour in 2025. This has brought our overall estimate up to 319 million in resident time loss. Of this, 293.5 million is from Metro Denver residents, while 20.2 million is attributed to the Mountain Resort Region residents and 5.4 million to Western Slope residents. One of the largest increases in actual dollar terms was in our business impact section this year. Here we're looking at declines in productivity that could occur because of congestion along I-70, and we estimate this number to be at $1.9 billion as of 2025. There are a lot of ways that declines in productivity can show up due to congestion. One, just on the labor force side, is unreliable commute times, leading you to either be late to work or to miss work, or to show up to work tired. In the mountain resort region, people have to live farther away from their jobs and are more prone to run into congestion as they try to get to work. There are also significant freight and supply chain impacts. As I mentioned earlier, the $2 million that local businesses spend in the mountain resort region just due to shipping delays is compounded across the corridor at $14 million annually in terms of increased shipping costs. There's also increased risk here in terms of supply chains. The mountain resort corridor relies a lot on shipping coming into the region. An extended closure could have a significant productivity impact. One of the things that we're seeing from the economic development side is that this is actually starting to impact our ability to recruit primary employers and primary jobs into the region. Outdoor recreation is a major sell when we're talking companies into looking at headquarters or a production facility in Colorado, and the lack of reliable, congestion-free transportation up into the mountain resort region is something that is starting to affect us in our ability to win projects. On the government side, the way that we do our estimate here is we're looking at what the sales and use tax revenue decline would be from our estimate of tourism spending at risk, but I would like to note that there are significant other costs that we're actually going to go into in a section of the report that we're going to based on some feedback. And this is mostly related to the fact that increased congestion and closures can put a significant strain on mountain resorts and other communities along the corridor that don't really have the tax base to fund their emergency response services in a way that is conducive to the level of travel that is going through their regions. In our Beyond the Numbers section, like I mentioned earlier, we are looking at 4 major themes here. One is sort of we could call it a housing crisis in the mountain resort region. Housing prices along this part of the corridor are up about 200 to 300% since 2000. This is putting significant strain on workers that need to live close to their jobs, which is increasing commute times, which worsens congestion in somewhat of a feedback loop. On the climate and weather side, again, more persistent wildfire floods and low snow years actually can lead to closures and also concentrated travel times around snow periods where you have people getting up into the mountains for a nice powder day. These are sort of shifting people's travel trends and also leading to increased diversions. In terms of diversions, when you're putting significant strain on roadways that are not designed for this really increases safety risk, and it also increases infrastructure strain in those communities. Finally, we have a health and environment section that just looks at the fact that congestion raises pollutant levels and emissions, and that this sort of increases during stop-and-go conditions. So what is the traffic along I-70 doing for environmental and health impacts? In terms of looking at the 2007 report with the 2006 report, there is one error on the slide which I'm going to point out. So overall, the growth in our congestion-related cost number is up 168%. Of this, there was a 275% increase in resident time loss costs. The tourism impact was actually up 88%. I apologize for this typo. And the business impact was up 159%. I don't have this on a slide here, but what I did in a later update of this presentation is I wanted to compare this by the categories for inflation. So in inflation terms, like I said, the overall number is up about 53%. The tourism impact is actually only up about 7%, which indicates that tourism spending in the mountain resort region has actually only increased right at the rate of inflation. It is possible that some of this lag versus the other components is due to congestion-related issues. But I'd like to note that resident time loss are actually up 114% on a real basis. Most this is coming from is that there are more congestion days along I-70. The sunk costs to recreation have increased. Also, the cost to repair vehicles gain more wear and tear. Congestion has increased, and most importantly, people's time is worth more because of rising average real wages. On the business impact, this is mostly coming from a significant increase in economic activity across Colorado. This number is actually up 47% in real terms from the 2005 study. Just to wrap up here, our final analysis, sort of what we pulled out of this, is that I-70 congestion it's not really just only a transportation inconvenience. It really functions as an economic constraint, and it has measurable consequences for every sector of Colorado's economy. Congestion costs have grown in real terms, not just due to inflation. Increase is somewhat related to population growth, but also higher wages, expanded tourism, et cetera. The cost of delayed construction really does compound over time. This estimate that we have $1 billion for the upper bound of what CDOT would want to do in the 2011 PEIS, I think really nails it home. And also, congestion is really embedded into this sort of broader system of structural challenges that are going along the I-70 corridor, which is housing, workforce, and diversion pressures and an increase in closures. In sum, we think that reliable corridor performance is increasingly central to Colorado's regional economic efficiency and also our statewide competitiveness. I'd be happy to answer any questions now.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Do you have any questions or comments on this item? Yes, Kent Mormon.
Are you doing any projections of the improvements that are going on at 70 right now, what that will do on this report? Will it reduce these impacts that you're talking about, or will they continue to?
So two things. One, in this study, we are really focusing on I-70 as it is right now. We did that primarily because the last study was done that way. However, I do have a couple of emails into some people down at CSU Ready who are doing a project on the Hill project to see how that is currently affecting travel and spending, but also how once that project is done, that might affect congestion through the region. So it is something that I would like to add to this report. I was thinking that we could publish this report sort of as it is and then publish that as an addendum so that we don't conflict between the two things of trying to evaluate I-70 as it is, but also thinking towards the future and improvements that might be made that could change the game.
Oh, yeah, Gene.
Thanks for the presentation. It's fascinating, also alarming. My question is, how has the 2007 report been used over the last 20 years, and how do you intend to use the results of this report?
So as far as I understand it, the 2007 report really published or it created numbers that people used in discussions that for the better part of 15 years. So what we were kind of hoping for is to update those numbers so that people can use them so that when they have discussions about what to do along I-70, they have these facts readily available to them. I can tell you that from my perspective, we are presenting to our stakeholders, and we're available anytime anyone wants us to present this data if it helps them achieve a goal.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to speak for you, Sean, so tell me if this is incorrect, but from the 2007 report was a very famous, I don't remember the actual number, but a very famous, like every hour of I-70 costs XYZ, and that got in the common vernacular, and I think part of the motivation, not that individual number, but one of the foundations as well, given how much has changed over the past 20 years, 18 years or so, what does that look like today? And I think that's part of what this study wanted to answer. Is that fair, Sean?
I would agree, 100%.
Thank you, Jacob. I think Angie is up next.
Sean, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really fascinating. I'm thinking a lot about the workforce component of this. I'm interested in learning from you what kind of formula you used and how the impact on all of these things that are happening on the corridor, if you're seeing more TDM components, particularly for lower income wage workers, how they're getting to and from the Western Slope.
Sure. So there is a pretty significant section that I wrote in this, which discusses actually the tack that local governments, but also employers are taking to mitigate some of the increases in home prices and the unavailability and unaffordability of homes for their workers. So the numbers behind home price increases are pretty straightforward. It's 200 to 300% anywhere along the corridor. We have some short-term rental numbers in there. I know that the second home number is above 60%, meaning that most people don't live in their houses up in the mountain region year-round. I can say that from a local government perspective, what a lot of people are trying to do is create this deed-restricted percent of area median income, dedicated housing. The impact of this, I don't think we've seen yet because it's not substantial enough. Same with the workforce side, but we are paying close attention to it, and we do have that analysis in the paper. I don't know if there's another stat that would help you, like the number of workers that actually have to commute long distances, or even an actual quantifiable number on, like, say, the average commute time. That is something that we could definitely look into putting in the report if we could get at it. Yeah.
Thank you, Angie. Good comment. Yes, David Krutzinger.
David Krutzinger, City and County of Denver, also I-70 collaborative effort. I understand a version of this presentation was given to the I-70 coalition last week. I'm curious what their concerns or questions were and what your responses were.
Sure. I was asked to go through a little bit of how we got at some of our figures and describe some of the time series trends that we've seen. They were actually surprised that tourism spending in the mountain resort region hadn't increased as much as they thought it would over that period. One of the main comments that we got, and this is something that we are going to add to the report based on the feedback, is that closures, or the costs of closures, are different depending on where they happen along the corridor. They're also different depending on where you have increased strain and also stuff like increased crashes. Whether that takes place in an area where the government has significant enough funding to provide emergency services based on that increase in traffic. What we were asked to do is look at closures by region. Right now, we're thinking of splitting it out on the regions that we already have. If we get down the road and we find some other regions that might actually look better to analyze, we're going to do that. I have a meeting with Clear Creek. The response from Clear Creek was that they are maxed out on emergency services and that they're not seeing increased revenue from spending that could offset some of that. So sorry if I didn't mean to jump the gun on that one. Was I accurate in my? Okay, great.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
In the report, it says 93% of the trips are taken by personal vehicle.
Yes.
What are the other 7%?
Oh, sure. The other 7% are, what we're looking at here is do people take publicly available transportation, or do they fly into a mountain resort airport versus flying into DIA if they're not from Colorado, or driving up to the mountains? I don't have the actual numbers on which is the most, but I believe it to be mostly the public transportation, bus staying, snow staying, and other local transit within or from one mountain community to another.
So within that 93 is included our...
Correct, yes. Personal vehicle in that sense might not be the way to say it. We might want to revise that slightly to just say vehicle.
And I'll follow up to that. Has there been an inventory since 2007 of the number of car storage spots, parking spots that have increased in the mountain?
Oh, that's a great question. That's look into. Sorry, that hasn't come up before, but it is an interesting question of when people drive up to the mountains, do they have a place to park? How expensive is parking? Actually, that would be a really interesting addition. I'll make a note.
Yes, David, as a follow-up.
Follow-up question as well. As you may know, the I-70 PEIS has a tiered set of recommendations. Do the data say anything about what modal solution helps this congestion problem, where if we built a train versus we widen the highway, it's a six or one half dozen of the other?
So unfortunately for this question, we do not give any solutions in this report. That would be a separate discussion, and it would be better for us if we had the available options presented to us, and then we're able to analyze them on a relative basis. I apologize for that.
That's a good clarification. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Jacob.
John, first of all, thanks for coming to present to us. So you've gotten some good feedback, I think, today, and you've talked about maybe a couple things to add to the report. Can you talk about the timeline of releasing the report, when the study will be finalized, particularly given the feedback you're getting from us and others?
Sure. So originally, we wanted to get this report out in early May, just Memorial Day. People start driving, you start talking about congestion along I-70, it gets into people's heads. However, the closure study that we've been asked to do is pretty detailed. So I think that the way that this is going to go is I should be getting the feedback from everybody in the next couple of days. Depending on how difficult that is, that's something that we could normally do in a week or two. The closure study is going to take a little bit longer, so I'm kind of thinking mid to end of May. And we want to obviously be cognizant of our stakeholders there, but also do the analysis the right way.
Other questions or comments?
Brody?
I could be here all day, sorry.
You can't do all day, but go ahead.
So within the shuttle trips you're counting, are you counting, say, commercial shuttles or mountain carriers, Epic, things like that? Okay.
Again, please forgive my phrasing when I called it all public transportation. This is both paid transportation like a shuttle that you take and anything that has a public component to it. So it's both.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any last questions or comments? I want to thank a lot of TAC members. Those are really good questions and hopefully gave some really good feedback, and appreciate the update, certainly as someone who has been part of that resident time loss many times in the corridor and understand the importance. So thank you very much for that presentation. We look forward to all working together to see what we can do to make improvements someday. So thank you.
Thank you.
So up next will be item number 6. That'll be the 2029 to 2032 Transportation Improvement Program Regional Share Update. This was attachment D in your packet. And Todd Cottrell, our program manager with the programming and project delivery team, will present this item.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're here again. So, last month, we were here with, again, we're continuing this discussion regarding the policy development and ultimately an amendment to the policy document. Last month in March, we talked a little bit about active transportation and how that may fit in. And this, I won't say this month, but now we are going to be talking about the regional share and sort of where are we. So some of you have participated in discussions over the last few months. We did form a TIP subcommittee to specifically talk about topics that during your regular TAC meetings, we wouldn't just be able to have the time to have a free-form discussion and get into a lot of detail. So we formed this TIP subcommittee to talk about a few, somewhat more important, what we feel that are going to be in-depth conversations. And so we have had 2 of those conversations in February and March, and now we are bringing that back to TAC. We've heard all of the discussions, so I apologize ahead of time for those who attended one or both of those meetings. You're going to hear a lot of repeat today, but we wanted to make sure we got this in front of everyone to really hear the full picture, what, from a staff perspective, we sort of feel where we are and where we could potentially go, and then we'll take it from there. So, just an outline, quick outline of today. We did want to explain what the regional share existing process is. So again, everyone sort of has a baseline. And again, we've conducted that call a few times. So just a few trends so that we can sort of set the stage for what changes we may want to look for the future. Outline those discussions to date. Identify sort of what staff feels are the 2 paths forward. Have that discussion and then figure out what those next steps are. So, in terms of the actual regional share process, we have a line in our TIP policy to achieve the regional outcomes and objectives of MetroVision and the regionally funded project and program investment priorities set by the Regional Transportation Plan. Very lofty, doesn't really get us anywhere, but this eligibility, this line sort of sets the eligibility for the regional share. Eligibility is extended to both projects and programs, though I will say we have yet to ever have a program submitted. We can talk about that here in a little bit. But after sort of off the top, we take the funding dedicated for the set-asides. 20% of the remaining funds are allocated to the regional share. So per policy, in terms of the number of submittals, any one jurisdiction may submit as many applications as they want. However, as a forum, each forum is only allowed up to 3 submittals to DRCOG per forum. Outside of that, 2 from CDOT, 2 from RTD. All of those applications sort of, again, first go to your individual forum, maximum of 3. That forum will sort of turn those projects over to DRCOG. Our staff will sort of have an internal panel to score them. So we have a multitude of scores. We will turn those scores directly over to a panel so that the panel can discuss and ultimately make a recommendation back to DRCOG in terms of which ones would be funded, which ones in which order a wait list would be created. That panel is sort of key in this process and is made up of one technical forum member from each of the 8 forums, one member from RTD, one from CDOT, and up to 5 subject matter experts. In the past, I think we've sort of settled around 3 subject matters members each. So again, that's sort of just a high-level overview of what the existing process is. We've conducted this process 3 times now, one with the 2023 tip, and then the last 2 with all of these 4 calls for projects that we really don't want to get into again, but we conducted 2 pretty much back-to-back, one for projects that went into the 22-25 tip, and then another to create the new 24 to 27 tip. So again, we've conducted this 3 times so far. And as I mentioned earlier, no program submittals, and really only CDOT sort of covers that entire MPO. Now, one could possibly look at this as maybe sort of we were implying a lot more restrictions into this as that were really needed. But regardless, I think at least from what on a staff perspective we've heard, we really didn't hear any rumblings from whether it be a local government or CDOT or RTD that they may be interested in an actual program that would affect sort of the entire MPO or at least a majority of it. Another trend that we saw, and again, I think for all these trends, you can look at these as, well, this is okay, or maybe this is not okay, because I think everyone can sort of take something away from it slightly different. But from the applications that we have seen funded, they were generally sort of all over the place. And they were, again, really didn't align with other submittals to address regional goals. And again, I can definitely see from the application criteria is that it wasn't set up to do that in the first place. So again, not a bad thing. This is just an observation from the regional share criteria that we've had for each of these calls for projects. Rightly or wrongly, the application criteria for both the regional share and the sub-regional share are identical. Take that with what it is. You know, I think we could have multiple arguments on both sides, whether that is a good thing or whether that was probably a bad idea. The current definition for the regional share is confusing. It's very hard to describe. We will, on a staff level, we will even note that from the beginning. I know, Kent, you were there from the beginning. This goes back to conversations we had 9-10 years ago. We were really never able to successfully say, this is what a regional share project or this is not. And we've always kind of used the term, we'll know it when we see it. And that's generally true, except when you try to frame that within other conversations, you try to tell an applicant that, or you try to tell the panel or the DRCOG board that, it's, again, it doesn't really mean anything because it's all in the eye of the beholder. So that sort of gets us to where we're at right now. And again, I think when we had the first TIP subcommittee meeting, it was a little disjointed, and I think once we came back and held that second one, we sort of put everything into perspective. And so I just wanted to make sure we all have a grounding of where we're at and where we're heading. So the formation of that subcommittee was really to, again, have those additional discussions, look at those potential changes, essentially have a longer 2-hour discussion versus me just standing up here for a half an hour and be very limited in the fact that there's other agenda items on your normal TAC agenda. So we just really wanted to use it as our sounding board. And historically, for almost every TIP cycle, we've had some form of a panel that maybe some of you have even sat on previously. The purpose of TAC and ultimately the board is really to take that information, add those details, lead us towards a decision point, ultimately leading to those recommendations and actions to create the amendment that ultimately by the end of this year we're going to have. So let's start talking about what we heard on those concepts to really improve the process. Like I said, we've had these conversations with the TIP subcommittee already in February, March, and they generally broke down to sort of 4 individual segments. Alignment to a regional transportation goal, things that are happening with the application process and the submittal process, and what could we possibly look at and change with those, and then sort of an eligibility and also other. We threw a few other things in there. So let's talk about the potential to align the regional share to one of the regional transportation goals. So we did a lot of polling within these TIP subcommittees if you weren't involved. So again, that's where a lot of this information came from in addition to the discussions that we had in addition to the polls. So everyone felt they were generally satisfied with the current process, but there was support to tie the regional share to one of these regional goals. And the most logical sort of goal, since the TIP implements the RTP, would be to use one of the RTP investment priorities, and there's 6 of them. And those, you know, might change over time, so ultimately this is sort of a one-shot thing, one shot in time. And again, 4 years ago, if this process is successful and we continue with it, that goal might change. So the goal is not static and can change sort of with the wishes of this group or our board. But I think we can't just say, hey, here's a goal, align to it, go forth and submit your projects. We kind of thought that there needed to be an additional sort of layer to that, and what we called sort of using a tiered system. And that might provide some additional level of detail. So I think in this example, we said tier 1. What if it was just the goal? So for example, safety. So all projects in the regional share must align to safety. Well, you could also continue that. So tier 2, what happens if you add in sort of a mid-level of detail? So maybe it's only certain types of improvements. You could take that even further and add an additional level. So maybe this is only at certain locations. And again, how you describe tier 2 and tier 3 might be totally different from one goal to the next, but it provides just another level of context to be able to ultimately get to the goal that you want. So again, after those conversations and polling, the subcommittee pretty much felt that tier 2 was a good starting point. And again, without necessarily even knowing if this was going to go forward and what that goal may be, again, just tier 2 from the mid-set. So let's talk a little bit about the actual application process. So again, as I mentioned, the regional and sub-regional shore applications are exactly the same, whether that's right or wrong, but we sort of took it, what happens if we could just continue the process as is? We don't sort of invoke a goal into the process. Well, I think those felt, let's keep the application generally the same. Now, of course, there is going to be some application question changes. We're going to go through that regardless, but in general, let's keep the application the same. However, after discussion, if we are using a goal or multiple goals, let's have that goal that is selected have multiple questions added to it. So for example, again, I'll go back to safety, which I mentioned earlier. The other 5 goals might have 1 question each, where maybe safety, we would have, 4 or 5 questions. So again, just re-emphasizing that this is the goal, but also notifying that we have to relate back to all of the goals in terms of what's in the regional transportation plan. We also discussed about the introduction of a 2-step application process. And I would say if you have ever submitted within one of the TIP set-asides, you're probably pretty familiar with this. They vary, but in general, there's a letter of interest. There's some sort of panel that reviews and discusses that letter of interest, and then you would be invited to submit a full application. Now, we don't really know what that process would look like, but I think most felt that this had merit and we would need to have further discussions in terms of what that two-step process looked like. Let's talk about the submittal process. So currently right now, the forums sort of are that body that collects the applications and sort of have the say-so in terms of which 3 applications get submitted to DRCOG for consideration. Based on those polls and the discussions, everyone sort of felt strongly, let's keep the forum process as is. I think they even mentioned it's a perfect pre-screening step to identify the submittals. Honestly, I think from a staff perspective, we weren't necessarily looking to take that away from the forums. We just wanted to have a gut check to make sure that this was the right step, it was the right process to continue with. Finally, we can get into sort of that other category. So the first are the funding minimums and maximums. So the minimums are $100,000 in DRCOG funds with a maximum of being $20 million. This conversation sort of went a little bit nowhere, only because I don't think we were far enough along in any of the decisions. So sort of the discussions that we've had to date was really, let's just table this. We will come back to it at a later time. We also asked and posed the question, so if we align the regional share to a goal, does that restrict project type eligibility? And an example that we use directly from our conversation, so let's pretend for a second that active transportation is the goal of the regional share. Could applicants submit a roadway operational project if that project had an active transportation component? And I would say historically for most roadway operational projects, there probably is an active transportation component to that project. What we heard in an overwhelming voice was, let's not restrict project types, meaning if active transportation was the goal, if we were to say there's a restriction on, you could only submit active transportation projects. So that's not what sort of the panel led us to believe. Basically, there needs to be a component, but if your primary objective would, in this example, is roadway operations, you could continue with that as long as it had the goal of or it had an element of whatever that goal happened to be. We also talked about the potential idea of renaming the regional share to the regional priority. And again, I will admit this was mine, something we threw in there. And again, it's just maybe a different thought process, something to change the minds and sort of re-emphasize what this important money could be used for. It is our priority. That was its original intent. Some liked it, but I think most sort of went to the effort of saying, well, let's wait and see. So we will bring this up later on this year. So I think after all these discussions, this really led us with 2 paths forward. And again, this is from our staff perspective. We're looking for your input today to see if we can sort of nail down one of these and move this forward to a future board discussion. So the first one is basically keep the regional share as it is, but obviously we'll do some small adjustments. So again, we were already planning to review all of the application questions. We will continue and go forth with that. The plan is within the next few months, we'll probably bring that to the TIP subcommittee first, and then ultimately back to this group. We will have no further discussions about aligning to a regional share goal or the 2-step application process. At a later time, probably this fall, we will bring back up funding minimums and maximums in terms of what you submit, and then the renaming of the share. Again, we'll have those discussions later on once a lot more is known. The second path forward that we saw was, let's totally change this up and let's include a goal from the RTP. So assuming positive feedback that we hear today, assuming positive feedback that we hear from our board members at a board work session in early June, we will begin a process to identify what that goal should be. We'll continue with the process of reviewing the application questions. Again, that was already sort of on the table. And once the goal is identified, we will ultimately add more questions to whatever that goal or goals will be. So we might add 2, 4 more questions to that individual goal. Hard to tell until we actually get into that. We'll work through a process to sort of figure out how the 2-step application process would look, and we'll ultimately bring that back to this group. And again, the last one, we will address the funding minimum and maximums and the regional share renaming later on this year once more information is known. It sort of brings us to what's next. As I mentioned, June 3rd, that's sort of when we're planning and anticipating going to our board work session, a very, very similar discussion to what you're hearing today. We will continue with the TIPS committee discussions as warranted. On here, we have TIP set-asides and application questions. I think we've changed that since this went out. The TIP set-aside discussion will probably come back to this group TAC in May, led by Josh. We don't think, as of what we're seeing right now, there's a high enough level of change to really warrant more and additional discussions than what we could handle with this group. We will, again, continue discussions, not necessarily at a monthly basis, but through the rest of this year. Sub-regional share, we still need to have conversations on the TIP fee introductions, set-asides, as I just mentioned, and again, previously mentioned funding minimum and maximums. And I'm quite sure application questions, and there's probably more that I'm missing. That's where we're at right now. Happy to take any comments or questions. That's a lot of information I probably just threw at you. Tried to keep it broken down into segments, and happy to hear your feedback.
Todd, for that presentation, and then obviously it sounds like as we're making comments, would you like feedback on those questions, Todd, and some detail on preference for those two? Or
yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think we would like to hear direction one way or the other, and maybe there's a third or there's a fourth option. But I think ultimately, if we feel as PAC as going regional goal is good, that will sort of set us in that direction. If not, we'll pull back and finish on a few other items.
That sounds good. So obviously this is an action item, so I'm not going to vote, but as you discuss, if you want to kind of highlight some of these, that would be helpful. So with that, any comment, or who would like to go first? Yeah, Colleen.
Thanks, Todd. Since I haven't been part of the committee, I'm just curious in terms of the goal. What have the conversations been about what the process would be, decide what the goal might be, and why it's been focused on maybe just a single goal instead of looking at more than one?
Honestly, we have not had that level of detail. At our very first TIP subcommittee meeting, we did ask through a question with no other information known what you thought that goal may be. I think in hindsight, we sort of learned that was probably not the optimal time to learn, to ask that question, only because there were so many unknowns, it didn't seem fair to ask that. So that would be like really step one if we all feel a goal is the most appropriate direction to head in.
And I might supplement that answer a little bit. Just everything Todd said is correct, but also, keep in mind that the regional share is 20% of the total amount. So if the idea is to focus these funds, and if we want to do that through more goals from the regional transportation plan, the RTP currently has six priorities that we've talked about making one or maybe two of those a goal. If we start doing 3, 4, 5, right, then we run into a different problem of not being able to focus those dollars enough. So it's not that we said it has to be one priority or one goal, but we did, if we go down this road, probably want to somewhat limit and focus ourselves as much as we can to maximize those 20% dollars.
Thank you, Jacob. Other questions? Yes, Michelle Melanakis.
Hello? There we go. Sorry. Thanks, Todd, for this, and special shout out to everyone who's on the subcommittee. It seems like that was quite a bit of work. I had one question around the regional share process. It sounded like at the beginning you were kind of keying up to have some kind of benefit or additional scoring to regions that would work together on common goals, so that you have so many separate projects scattered all over the place. And I think that the regional filtering or coming to consensus process works really well, but it doesn't lend itself well to working well with other counties to coordinate on projects. And so I just wondered if discussions came up around that, or if there was any thoughts around streamlining that process to facilitate regions working together on goals for projects.
As best as I can recall, there's no sort of conversations around that. And again, somebody correct me that was there, they heard something different. It's certainly possible, even through the application itself, that if we wanted only certain project types to be submitted, we could certainly, I think, do that. And I think going to a goal sort of gets us in that direction. But I think the purpose is really not really to say that, well, let me just keep it way up here. The concept of having, individual members forums submit what they wish, sort of to a certain degree belongs within the sub-regional share. And because that's really the purpose of the sub-regional share. And the regional share is really getting at achieving sort of visions from a regional level. And so again, we've always tried to get forums to work together, but I think by just looking at the nature of the application and the existing process that we have, for example, we didn't necessarily focus project types. And so project types were sort of all over the place. And I think that's where what we're trying to do with this is just by applying sort of a regional goal or something that everyone in the regional share who wants to submit a project for can really raise up and get to that level. Don't currently have, and I wouldn't anticipate that we're going to have some sort of mechanism that if you want to with your neighbor, we would give you sort of bonus points for that. That's not necessarily structured. So I think there's not necessarily think we have to take that off the table. We could sort of achieve that in different ways if we really wanted to.
I'm not going to team every answer, but I'll help you on this one. Fine. By the that we
I'm getting there.
There we go, that one. Yeah, so to your question too, I think part of it was, if we have a goal and if we do a goal and what tier we do, and maybe it's tier 2, part of it is, and I'm just going to make it up to answer your question. Let's say safety is our goal, and let's say tier 2 talks about a type of safety improvement. It's left turns or something. I'm just making stuff up. But let's say it's some programmatic, left turns at intersections kind of thing. That's a little bit different than if we said safety is our goal, but maybe we're going to look at the top 7 segments of regional high work and become the roadways eligible for regional if we did something like that. The point is that the way we start defining it and the goal of tier we use probably helps lead to what coordination between forums. looking at location of very specific types of improvements, or looking at programmatic types of improvements, could occur across the that might lead to some kind of coordination form. I think that's part of the issue.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Gene.
Thanks for the presentation and summarizing the subcommittee. Could you know what you mean by a tip fee?
Let's go to that conversation.
You to do it, or you want to do it?
If you want, okay. It's like I have a canned answer, but I'm sure we pretty much have the exact answer.
Yeah, we don't have an answer, but so understand that this is a concept that we're looking at. It is partially defined, something we're thinking about. I'm going to put all the caveats, right? Additions and exclusions may apply. Please contact your lawyer for further details. All right. So the idea of a tip is it's been a long time since DRCOG has adjusted the membership fee, the amount of the fee and the form of how that fee is calculated. And I don't want to get, so please don't ask complicated questions about assessed value and all those other things. The point is that in looking at how we assess membership dues, there is an opportunity, I think, for some improvement, some updating on how to do the calculated fee, that we assess. And that we've been looking at a concept, and a couple other NGOs do this. Josh's former St. Louis Escape this, where that actually just comes from, and the idea is that you would, what are we looking at, 1.5% actually? 1.5%. The idea is that at the time of tip application, you would just pay 1.5% project amount. And what that would help offset the costs, obviously, that go into managing these tip process, everything that we've been going through the project selection process, managing those tip projects as they go forward. But what it would also do is, through the math, would actually get you more federal funds. And it would reduce you as local governments paying assessments at DRCOG. It would reduce your membership fee at DRCOG because we're able to make some of it through. So we think the concept is win-win. We're for a little bit of what it would look like and the timing of when we would potentially roll that out. And so we're not ready to do that, which is why you heard from us. So I don't want to get over our skis on this, but it is that we're looking at, and both to part of updating some equity related to membership, our membership dues of DRCOG, and way ultimately, again, win-win, get you funds and tip. So that's all I want to say about it. Ask me hard questions.
Does anyone have an easier question? Michelle.
I think so. Or more of a comment, really, but I appreciate all the work on this field to choose your own right now. I'm curious, like, if we the root of the, it's because it's kind of test site, but if we pause for resources for X number of years, can we move the needle or full, like, whatever goal, director kind of. To that end, if we do be curious, what goal are we furthest from? We need to move the needle more quickly or closer to what we're aiming for. I still think that getting the entire board of directors on the same boat as that goal is probably challenging. And then maybe a third option would overcome things would be, first 20% is the goal that we're trying, and there's where it's, business as usual for how the regional fair was, just to keep it flexible.
Looks like no. Sorry. Take it back again. Jacob's going to really appreciate it. I think just
batteries and currently 6, they're not equal in terms of measures. So for those already become share by assumptions. But what does that mean for the trade? What's the goal? It's a little harder. Safety is a little bit easier. Quality, this is really, we're not ozone non-attainment, right? We do share to that. I guess your question is really helpful. The answer to it is though.
Project. So, yeah. You can 75. You know, every out is enough. Don't know if we spend $5 the goal. Doesn't matter how we get there. It might, but the goal or pick we if we're of high so the strict graphically will again back at the end dollars work please part of your question, talk or adding the level of nations do, and
Hello?
that is be a conversation.
About, you know, we in the important for what 30 we give at the change and maybe just do first off to the answer.
Well, I would anticipate if this 4-year were to access that years for a project, which based 4 years.
That's very fair, reasonable for you. Particular areas that we let fall back.
Important to keep that on the individual sub to necessary to a goal sub or just submit what fits the cycle. On top of that, 7. So plenty of area what we're talking about the regional relatively small, pun intended, of the pot of funds available. So to go 5 more minutes.
As you say, evaluate this goal or goals at the end of 4 projects. Just on that 3rd or 4th. So you're having to look at see if that. So go with it. My concern for not wait them. Yeah, do a quick look at as we go to the next tips. Year or 2 ahead, you really have a year project, not even construction or maybe design versus a construction phase. And if you're really going to hit it, are you doing at other projects construction in the first 2 years so that we can figure out did we meet the goal?
100% correct.
Yeah, welcome to our section of under federal regulation annual statement. exact same concern. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, very much a valid point. Again, my perspective, you know, if we agree on to say it's safe, pick a goal, right? Let's see. Yes, we recognize that we are funding a spectrum of projects. We'll be studying. Some of those will be environmental. Those will be in the construction ones. Some of them will be first year. Some will be in the fourth year. Like, how do you, you know? So it's so the point, Ken. Much. Here's what we did. We show forward that we for your taxpayer dollars and the tip show value, but with the context provide about the fact that planning spectrum and planning a snapshot in time. So we, to me, I want to feel good about the front end into it and the caveats on the back about how hard it is to measure success, but at least aiming to do our level, make sure those are invested wisely.
I do know, Chair, you wanted to wrap this discussion up, and I think maybe we've come to the end where I guess there's options in front of us. Does everyone feel comfortable enough to give us an indication whether we're toward a goal or not? Second, maybe sometime this week we can verify and hold all TAC members and one would they that can give you time to think, even potentially go back to your staff and have a discussion. Thoughts?
I'll suggest option two, which is if you don't feel strongly or the other, maybe you tell us that. Once we heard from you all and the tips up is it's time to get this and move this forward, time to get it to, if we can't write somewhere, maybe it's nice if we could, but can't, maybe you tell us that you also confirm we should take this to the board and have the same conversation with them too and see where they land. I didn't undermine your intent.
Oh, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, Sequence.
Sequence, Douglas. I guess I would just ask the question, because it wasn't shown on our list of action items today, need notification we move on this?
How many years have I been? No, it's a good question, but this isn't action. This is just, we're asking for direction. So this is an informal ask.
Okay.
Thank you for putting us on.
Yes, Ken Mormon.
Ken Mormon City. I would suggest that we, this option and take him with the, take it down, eliminate it. I think it.
Yeah, Ken, I think that's what I've been hearing today, right? A lot of great comments, a lot of good conversation. You know, it does sound like there's, between what we're talking the subcommittee and here, right, some desire, right, to look at this process. I think some concern about how you define a goal. If you asked everyone in this room, you get 40 different goals that we'd be trying to accomplish, right, at defining that regional level. And I think that's the challenge we see. But can we allow this to kind of move forward a little more, right, have discussion about it, and not, that would indicate that we're at least willing to have it, right, versus saying just the existing process should move forward. So I'm sort of hearing a general consensus towards that we want to at least have those conversations move forward without anyone in the room having a incredibly strong conviction about what goal that might look like yet. So I don't see anyone yelling at me, so okay. Perfect. Oh, hey. So does that help, Tom?
That works. Yeah, we'll slow walk this forward. We'll have a discussion in early June with our board members, and we will sort of, I'm assuming, June or July, we'll bring this conversation back to this committee or the subcommittee, let you know at that time sort of how the board felt and what those next steps are, and start working towards them.
Thank you very much. And this is obvious, but I think everyone, Jack, this is a great time to go talk to your board members about this process. And as that comes to June, any questions, right, we can bring back to DRCOG, right, and get answers on those. So
Thank you very much. Thank you. So with that, we're going to move on to item number 7, the coordinated transit plan update. This is attachment E in your packet. Mallory Miller, the senior planner with the Regional Transportation Planning Team, is going to present this item.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to talk with you all about the coordinated transit plan and the update process we're currently going through. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the coordinated transit plan is a requirement under the Federal Transit Administration for those who manage 5310 funds. It's generally updated every 4 to 5 years. So at DRCOG, we last updated ours in 2021. There's a lot of flexibility in how these plans look like and what the kind of final product is. Some of them are as short as 40 pages, others are like over 300 pages. But the main requirements that each CTP has to have is an inventory of available transit services in the region. We have to identify the top needs and gaps in the region for specific communities, primarily those who are more mobility disadvantaged, such as older adults or individuals with disabilities. And then we set strategies in the coordinated transit plan to address those mobility needs, as well as identify which of those strategies are priorities for implementation. Additionally, projects that are funded under the Human Services Transportation Set-Aside and 5310 Set-Asides, funding opportunities, they are required to align with the coordinated transit plan, so that's another big part of why we developed this. So back in 2021, the top 5 needs and gaps that were identified by members of the public as well as various stakeholders, I won't go through these line by line, but there's kind of a common theme around increasing services. So whether that was expanding access to services for medical appointments, increasing availability of cross-jurisdictional trips, or improving access to medical visits. I think I might have said that one twice, or just overall expanding services to meet the increasing demand. So a lot of commonality around those top 3 things around expanding access. And then some other things identified were just creating more affordable fares for older adults and people with disabilities, as well as improving regional and local coordination. So between those top 5 needs and gaps, the community also identified strategic priorities that kind of directly correlated with addressing those needs and gaps. So that included, again, a lot of strategies around improving access to key services, improving coordination efforts between different transportation providers, as well as expanding first and last mile connection opportunities. And then we also identified as a region a goal to spend funding more efficiently. So that's just kind of where things stood about 5 years ago. And then as we're currently working through our new plan update in 2026, we've been really thoughtful about how we approach this. We've been reviewing a lot of other agency plans for inspiration to see, what else we can do to make this plan more actionable and kind of a quicker read. So one of the things that we'll be incorporating is an executive summary. So that's something you can just read at a very high level, ideally takes less than 10, 15 minutes of your time, and you can fully understand the main points in the coordinated transit plan. We also will be including a table of contents, which we missed last time, so you don't have to Control F through the online document to find what you need, but you can actually use a table of contents to find things like the assessment of available transit services or, what funding opportunities there are for transportation programs. Additionally, we're going to be setting some goals for our coordinated transit plan and what we want this update to achieve in the next 5 years. And then we'll be including a new strategy implementation matrix. So based off the feedback we received from members of the public and transportation providers, we want to use those top strategies and kind of have a matrix for how we're going to set priorities for implementing those over the next 5 years. Some other content updates that we're going through. So we're currently working on updating our demographic and regional data. We want this to focus more on projected population growth. We also are going to include some data that kind of demonstrates how mobility disadvantaged populations are less likely to have personal vehicles and more likely to rely on like public and specialized transit. We're going to include a brief report just touching base on those 2021 coordinated transit plans, top identified needs, gaps, and strategies that we just talked about, so that we can explain, you know, what progress we've made as a region and kind of what remains. And then we've also created new surveys for both providers and members of the public to improve our data collection and accuracy. So for example, in the public survey, we have a lot of like basic demographic fields that touch base on like age, county of residence, so we can better understand how different populations feel about these top needs, gaps, and strategies for improvement. And then there's been a lot of change in transportation services since we last did this in 2021. So we'll be updating that inventory of available transit services, and then we'll also be including a new microtransit category. So to cover our plan for kind of getting stakeholder feedback on top needs, gaps, and strategies, just so folks are aware, we're not actually required to get direct input from the public. This is something that we are choosing to do because we do want to hear directly from the people that this impacts, like what they are seeing and experiencing in our community. CTP update does allow folks to just use data and have planners kind of decide what these needs, gaps, and strategies are. But again, we're going to hear directly from the public. So we do currently have an online survey that's available for members to take. That's been out for about roughly a week now. We're starting to get some good feedback. And we're also going to be attending some community events. Attended one last week with the DRCOG Area Agency on Aging. So that was a great opportunity to meet with some older adults and hear from them their transportation needs. We also have a separate survey targeted towards local transportation providers. So we've been presenting this survey so far to various groups like the Ride Alliance Stakeholder Work Group, the Advisory Committee on Aging, and the Advanced Mobility Partnership Work Group. So we'll be continuing to kind of talk about this coordinated transit plan update and ask folks to weigh in on what they're seeing from a provider perspective in terms of needs, gaps, and strategies, excuse me. And then our timeline for all of this. So right now we're kind of in the data collection and stakeholder feedback phase. So again, working through making all of those plan updates. Over the summer, we'll be working with our CAM team to kind of design the plan, make sure it meets accessibility requirements. And then in late summer, we'll have the kind of draft version available for public and stakeholder review. So that'll be available online for 30 days to make any final recommendations. After that, we'll be presenting the finalized plan to different committees, such as TAC, and then the board for adoption. At this point, the plan will be available on our website for folks to read and use as needed. Any questions?
Valerie, any questions on this item? Oh, yes, we have one over here. David.
David Krotzinger, City and County of Denver. Mallory, thanks for the presentation. I think this will be an important conversation, both strategic level, moving from 12 or 13% over 65 population now to 20% 65 plus population, as well as tactical, solving the issues that your previous presentation started to address, which was if your provider doesn't go there, how do you get in line with the next provider? So there's both levels that I think this will need to deal with. Thanks.
Mormon, City of Thornton. Appreciate the presentation. For your stakeholder input, are you cutting it off like in May or June, or what's your thought? I'm thinking of the several festivals that are around in late May, early June. I'd be reaching out to the public on that at those festivals.
Now I think we're scheduled to close things up like more beginning to mid of May. But we can explore opportunities for expanding that, just depending on how much feedback we've gotten so far.
And the second question, will your report, you've listed up at front the 5 priorities or strategies. the report say where you've made, advancements on that? For instance, RTD 2020 changed their fare structure, et cetera. But will you say what has been accomplished from the previous report, or is this, just what's existing and?
Yeah.
Future?
I definitely want to make sure this includes like a brief kind of update on how we did in 2021. So we'll be including what those, that slide on like what those top needs and gaps were and how we've made progress, like with highlighting various projects like the Ride Alliance one, also RTD's change in fare structure, among other things.
Questions or comments?
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was great. I want to commend you for including outreach to the community's voice, because that's always one that makes me take notes. So a couple of questions. Is the survey available in multiple languages? And we do have events that are happening before May. We can send it out to you.
Yeah, definitely would love any to know about any more events that are happening to see if it's possible to attend. Right now, we do only have the survey available in English, unfortunately. So that is one limitation.
Other questions? Jean?
Valerie, thanks for the presentation and the great work. My question is, how can we help you spread the word about the survey? Is that something that you could send out to the TAC, or if you already did, forgive me?
No, it hasn't been out yet, but yes, we can definitely send the links to the public survey. If you have, members of the community that would like to see it, and we definitely want to hear from anyone interested in taking it. And then we do have that provider survey that is targeted towards like transportation providers. So I'll talk with Alvin and Jacob about to folks.
Last question. Comment. All right. Well, thank you very much for that presentation, Melanie. So item number 8 on your agenda, I believe, is postponed until our next. Yes. So we'll go ahead and move that to our next meeting in May. And with that, we'll actually move on to our member comments and other matters. And I believe, Alvin, do you have an announcement about our May TAC meeting?
Yes, so just a reminder, this should already be showing up in your calendars, but our TAC meeting is May 18th. So the third Monday of the month, not the fourth. We will not be meeting on Memorial Day.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any other member comments or other matters that were not addressed on the agenda today? Excited to share that. We will close that part. And as just mentioned, our next TAC meeting will be Monday, May 18th, 2026. And we are now adjourned at 3:19 p.m. Thank you all.